And there's a reason why we all have different talents, different gifts, different potentialities, and are interested in different things. I've always led, even in the schools I've been in. I mean, in middle school, I was the RCL deputy president. In high school, I was the RCL. When you get to council, there's already a particular view about you.
Yeah.
You know, you're not even being heard for what you're saying.
Dumelang Bagaetsho Kogai, and welcome back to Conversations with Madam President. And today on our show, we have Kefentse Mkhari with us today. Kefentse Mkhari, welcome to Conversations with Madam President.
Thank you very much, Madam President. And thank you very much for inviting us to be here.
It's an honor to have you here. We've been arranging this, but finally you are here.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for your time and taking your time off just to be with us and to just have a conversation.
No, it's such a pleasure.
Yeah,
I look forward to it.
Yes,
I really
yes.
look forward to it.
Before we get into it, please share with my viewers there, who is Kefentse Mkhari?
Well, I didn't think it would be such a formal interview. You know, when they say, tell us about who you are. This is the first question they do in formal interviews.
Yeah.
But look, Kefentse Mkhari is a simple, humble guy from Hammanskraal, born and bred there. Is a guy who's really interested in the development of this country and the African continent. I'm an activist at heart.
Yeah.
I've participated in a number of social movements that seek for social justice and transformation, such as the Fees Must Fall. As a student activist, also got an opportunity to lead as the Wits SRC president, 2016, 2017. That's about the time of Fees Must Fall. From there, did a number of community projects that had to do with trying to give back to the community. One of the projects we did was a massive pets drive called the 25,000 Sanitary Pets Drive in Hammanskraal. I'm also a political activist, so I participate in politics. I'm a member of the African National Congress, and I've participated on a number of levels within the organization and the movement. Currently, I serve the movement at the OR Tambo School of Leadership as their public relations and communications manager. And essentially what we do is to train leaders and deployees of the ANC, members, as well as leaders across various structures, just to educate them about what the ANC is all about, what is expected from them. And besides that, I'm an entrepreneur. I have a company that I established in 2018 called Consult Makandeni. We do projects management, marketing, and research with a focus in the corporate social responsibility space, just trying to get corporates to invest in communities. But we also do work with government. Besides that, I'm just chilled, a socialite, I like going out. A church-going person every now and then. So I'm just a chilled guy, but most importantly is that I'm a South African patriot. I really love this country. Albeit the challenges that we have, I think this is a beautiful country. I've had the privilege to travel quite a bit. And every time I've went out of South Africa, I've came back appreciating this country more. It has a lot of potential. You just wish that some things, were going right. But despite all of that, I think we are a country with great potential, great diversity. Great people, great weather. Even some of our infrastructure, in as much as most of it is dilapidating to some extent, but we do have great infrastructure. I mean, the roads that we have, national roads, are quite impressive if you compare us with other African countries.
Now
Yeah.
I'm inspired to travel.
Yeah, so yeah, I'm a South African patriot. I love this country. I genuinely love this country.
No, thank you so much. I wouldn't have done justice to the introduction. That's why I needed you to actually explain to us who is Kefentse Mkhari. And yes, I remember it was my first year, 2016, 2017. We just got to Joburg. I started my academic journey go UP. And yeah, Pretoria is a very chill place as compared to Joburg.
Yeah.
And now here I am coming into the Wits University environment, and we got there's someone called this SRC president, Kefentse Mkhari. Things were hectic then.
Yeah.
Imagine you're still a student trying to fit in, and here you are, coming from education campus with the bus, and the main campus is going up and down. And when you ask what's happening, no, there's a movement. But before we get into that, I want you to actually share with us, before we get into your journey as the SRC president, the significance of knowing thyself, right? And before we dwell into that, I would like to read this quote. Ne?
Sure.
It says, "The meaning of my existence is that life has addressed a question to me, or conversely, I myself am a question which is addressed to the world, and I must communicate my answer, for otherwise I am dependent upon the world's answer." Right. That is by Carl Jung, which is my favorite writer. So what is basically saying is that it's either we adapt to what is, or we are a question that is addressed to the world, and our lives must answer a certain question. What is the importance of knowing thyself?
I think it's the very essence of being.
Yeah.
Because there is a reason why we are in this world. And there's a reason why we all have different talents, different gifts, different potentialities, and are interested in different things. So it's important to know who you are, but it's also not easy. It's important, but not easy, because human beings are in a constant state of evolution.
That's true.
We evolve from the environments that we grow up from the environments that we engage, from the people we associate with, the literature that we read, whatever that we consume, including the food that we eat, makes us who we are. But I think at the fundamental level is what values and core principles define you as a human being. And those things, most of them are inculcated in our upbringing. I'm a product of my parents' teaching, my grandparents' teaching, my teachers' teachings, And just to sum a few, integrity is important, as a human being. You have to have integrity in who you are. Appreciating your weaknesses, your strengths, and not shying away from being who you are, and performing each task assigned to you to the best of your abilities. Reliability is important. I'm a second born at home. So already at home, there's already people who rely on me. I mean, I come from a fairly huge family. I have 5 siblings. So including my parents, it means there's 8 of us. So those people rely on me for one thing or the other. And I have to be reliable to be able to attempt by all means to meet whatever that they expect out of me. But there's also an extended community, whether it's your relatives, your friends, they must be able to rely on you. Thirdly, it's having a sense of purpose. What drives you as a person? We're all driven by a number of things. There are people who are driven by money. There are people who are driven by women. There are people who are driven by clothes. I'm one person who's driven by social change, wanting to see things different. And this thing has been with me from a young age. And maybe as we get into the conversation, some of those things will emerge. But I've always engaged in activities that seek to change society for the better, even when I was not aware of it. Because some of these things you realize them retrospectively. So social change, to say, it's important for me to leave a room better than I found it. It's important for me to leave a person better than I found them. And that is a great sense of responsibility. It requires you to always go the extra mile in terms of the values that you espouse as a human being, the intellect that you share, the work that you do, because you can't leave things better than you found them if you are going to be average in terms of how you conduct yourself. But for me, that's important. It's important that the day I die, one of the things that should be said in my obituary is, I've left the world a better place than I found it. I've tried by all means necessary to participate in activities that seek to make the world a better place. So it's important to know yourself. It's important to know what you are willing to offer and to work to cultivate yourself to be able to offer that, because at the end of the day, if you think about it, that is the essence of life. I mean, true. We often approach life from what we receive from it, the accolades, the material success, that and that. But ultimately, you waking up essentially says God has entrusted you to actually give something to the world, And that's why there's this famous cliche that says, if you go to the grave, there's a lot of potentialities that are buried. So I don't want to be that person. I want to give of myself as much as I can, because that is what I can give. For the fact that I can breathe, for the fact that I'm here, I can only offer myself. I'm not a millionaire as yet. So
as yet,
So I think in that context, it's very important to know yourself and espouse who you are in whatever that you engage in.
And here you are. 2016, 2017. You ascend into one huge role with great responsibilities. And the reason why I asked you, what is the significance of knowing thyself? It's understanding that when you ascend, or rather assume such responsibilities, there's so much that is expected of you. Please take us through the journey of being SRC president. How has that developed you? And how has that shown you your rather weaknesses and the areas which you knew that you needed to work on? How has that changed your perspective in how you saw life before? How has that really shaped the person that you are to? Because sometimes we get into a space thinking that where we were is all there is to it. And you step into a different space, you get to, actually, it's different. How has that, changed everything about you? Please take us through the journey of being an SRC president.
Well, I'll try, Madam President. I don't think that it's a conversation we can have at one go, because there's many parts to it.
And before we get into that, there's this picture, and what I love about it is that, every time I love writing, for the basis that there'll always be footprints left of what has happened at that time. There's this picture, I think it was on Vuvuzela. During that time, Mamphis must fall. The way you were jumping.
I know.
It did not only show the intensity of the events, but as well as you were so radical to say, I am doing this. People, I could read not only emotion, but the message, the mindset posture at that point is, where is this person at this time? So please take us through that.
Yeah, look, it was a very interesting time. In as far as my growth and development as a human being is concerned, probably that is one of the most important phases of my life, because it was a huge responsibility. I was only 21, 20 when I was elected. No, 21, because 2016. Yes, I was 21, and I did not fathom the extent of the responsibility that I was given to me. But also, I could not allow myself to fail because there's people who voted for you. There's people who believe that you are the one who must lead them. Yes. You can't let those people down. So we had participated in the 2015 Fees Must Fall. In fact, we're part of the people who conceptualized the movement and kicked it off. And maybe we'll have a chat about how that whole movement started, in particular at Wits. So when we came to 2016 and I'm elected president, even how I become president, it's a whole other story,
We would like to speak about that, even that part of the rain.
We'll get there, So I get in there, and already because of how I got in, there's already tensions within the team that I'm supposed to work with. And that is the first battle that I had to overcome, which was quite intense because I didn't realize that this thing is this big. Because I've always led, even in the schools I've been in. I mean, in middle school, I was the RCL deputy president. In high school, I was the RCL president. And when I came to Wits, this SRC thing was never really a goal, It's something that came along the way, because of the struggles that we had. So I didn't realize that this thing is this big, And now it was extremely big because of Fees Must Fall has happened. And there were certain dynamics that had happened in Fees Must Fall. For example, you had the person that I took the presidency from, or the person that I succeeded, President Nomphendulo Mkhatshwa, being on the front page of drama. And
she was big.
And seemingly people wanted that. They wanted those packs, for lack of a better word. And for me, it wasn't really about that. I wasn't really concerned about that. But also what made it extremely intense was the fact that the ANC itself in 2017 was going to an elective conference. And lo and behold, the factional dynamics of the ANC are filtered down to SRC level. And when that tension with the team that I led with came to the fore, and one started understanding what was really going on. And you found that there were very powerful and senior people, politicians, who were behind that. And that was the first shocker. Now, secondly, is that because we had protested in 2015, even went to the union building, and there was a concession of no fee increment. When we went to union building. Unfortunately, then the minister played. I remember it was on the 19th of September 2016 when he was having a press briefing. He then announces a fee increment of about 8%. And we say, no, we're shutting down because we can't keep protesting for fee increments. We have defined that now we want free education. When we shut down, what made this second shutdown intense was that already the institution was prepared for this. And the state was prepared. So from a security point of view, they were prepared. So that's why you saw the heavy militarization and the extensive physical violence that was inflicted on students. And because of the intensity of that second protest, it meant that the responsibility was far greater because you had more students being arrested, more students being injured, but also the internal conflicts in the movements as well, because in the first Fees Must Fall, you had the Fantastic Four, which was Comrade Shaira, Comrade Nombendulo Mkhatshwa, Comrade Mcewa Dlamini, Comrade Pambo. Everyone wanted to be that, wanted to be the new face, you know? And right from then, I had to then take a decision to say, I strategically don't want to be in these battles of who's in the forefront.
Yeah.
What I'm most concerned about is there's no spill of blood, particularly for students. And what I'm most concerned about is that we can minimize the extent of violence that is being inflicted on students, whether it's them being injured or being expelled. And so I decided to play that role where I was like, I don't want to be in the forefront, because if I go there, I'll only heighten this contestation.
Yeah.
Right? And remember, I'm dealing with now, one could say, a triple-edged sword, because I'm fighting with my colleagues as a result of how I became president.
Yeah.
I'm fighting the internal battles within the Fees Must Fall movement. I'm fighting with management. So I have to breach all of those conflicts. And you must remember, when you become an SRC president, you also become part of management.
That's true.
Because you sit in the executive council of the
yeah.
university, you sit in council, you sit in FINCO, you sit in all the statutory bodies that govern the institution. So you always have to mediate between the broader interest of the whole collective of the university and the interest of the student. And of course, the interest of the student takes precedence.
Yeah.
But there are situations where compromises have to be made. And because you sit in these meetings, you understand why these compromises have to be made, right? So that was one of the difficult part in mediating those three-leveled conflicts.
Yeah.
Right? And because of how intense the movement was, there were broken bridges, in particular between students and the management.
Yeah.
So the channel of communication had broken down completely. Oh, there's a fourth leg to this, the state. Because now you are SRC president.
Yeah.
You must engage the state through what we call the South African Union of Students, which is a union of SRCs. Here we are engaging with the state directly, the government, that is to say. We're engaging with the Ministry of Higher Education and Training and the security cluster at the time, because you'd remember one of the things that the government did in response to the Fees Must Fall, it responded to it as a security question beyond a political question. So you had a lot of coordination happening within the security cluster. You'd remember the press briefings where you had the Minister of Police at the time was Nathi Nhlekwa. You had the Minister of Justice, Masuta, Minister Masuta. You had the Minister of State Security, Minister Mahlobo. You even had the Minister of Defense, Mapisa Ngqakula, leading that, and I remember this because we once had a meeting at the Union Building with them. In fact, we're sitting in the main boardroom in the Union Building.
It was intense.
It was quite intense, right? Yeah. So after things boiled down, of course, I mean, there's been violence. When students are arrested, we have to make a plan that they are released. They have legal representation. When they're injured, we have to make sure that they are taken to hospital. So the damage is done, but at least there are some concessions that we win, like insourcing, increasing the threshold of NFSAS, which was sitting between 0 and 120, and we were able to increase it from 0 to 350. Which is the current threshold for eligibility, for funding. Then once the movement dies down, now you have broken bridges.
Yes.
between
It's quiet now.
management and
Your team.
and the students, and there's broken relations between myself and my team. So essentially, it became difficult. It became really difficult because when you get to council, there's already a particular view about you.
Yeah.
You know, you're not even being heard for what you're saying. Students are being excluded. We're trying to fight all of those battles, but management meets us with aggression. But also, campus is militarized.
Yeah.
Literally, I mean, one of the horrible things or side effects of Fees Must Fall is that campus life changed completely.
It did.
Even to this day,
It
it's quite different. I mean, there's heavy securitization. I mean, I tell these students who are on campus now that we used to have the time of our life on campus. It wasn't this hard to enter into campus.
Yeah.
Campus life was vibrant. We used to have parties on campus. But after Fees Must Fall, that changed. There was heavy securitization of campus, which still exists even now. So it was quite difficult. It became difficult, and on the other side, course is mooring you, you know, because you don't spend time in class.
True. Yeah,
you don't. Literally, I mean, you have to go and engage the ministry. From the ministry, you have council meetings, and when you go to council, council is like a board.
Yeah.
You get a pack, a huge pack that you have to prepare for. And you don't get an aid because when you are at that level, there's even confidentiality clauses that you must adhere to. There are some things you don't have the allowance to share with other people. They can only be seen by you, you know?
So it's getting into that.
Yeah.
So it's very much difficult having to deal with how you got to be the president, the team, and having to give them a vision of this is what is happening, because not everything is as it seems, right?
Yeah.
When now you've got the broader perspective of what is really happening. And because of such clauses, you are binded not to share. Because if you can explain it clearly to them, and maybe those factors or other details which are closed in the clause, you can't really be broad as you wish to. And that also contributes to affecting your team to say, I can't really be open as I wish due to the fact that I'm binded by this. And you find yourself at a place where now you've got to try to sell them a vision. You try to make them understand. How did that go about? And personally, mentally, how did that...
It was difficult.
Yeah.
As I was explaining, it was difficult, because you have the benefit of hindsight.
Yeah.
Because of what you said. And these people don't. But already, the relations themselves within the team were, I would say, beyond repair.
Oh, yeah.
There's a lot of undermining of each other and not working together, in a sense. So it got to a point where my mental state started deteriorating.
Yeah.
Because I was not getting support from the people I was supposed to be working with.
Yeah.
And I was not getting support from the institution itself because relations had broken. So it's like we're left to fend for ourselves.
Yeah.
But there's also this academic pressure because the university would not grant me a sabbatical. They refused, clearly. So it got to a point where mentally I collapsed. Literally, I collapsed. I remember collapsing with a strat plan. This was a midterm strat plan where we were supposed to write a report. And I collapsed. And there were a lot of things that happened before the total collapse. Because when your mental state deteriorates, it deteriorates in phases.
Yes.
For example, cognitively, I was not coherent. even in terms of writing.
Yeah.
You know, I would make silly mistakes, and maybe at that point I should have realized that there's a deterioration that is happening.
But the responsibility is here.
The responsibility is here, you know?
Yeah, you're expected to show up. Yeah.
You know? And then we had a strat plan, and I just mentally collapsed, called my dad, came to pick me up, and that was the end of it. That's how my term ended. I couldn't end it. Luckily, I was able to recover because the state in which I was in, many people don't recover. I was in a psychiatric ward for 2 weeks. Took time, and after I got better, I was told I must stop everything.
Yeah.
So I stopped everything for about 6 months. This is 2017. So I stopped everything for 6 months, you know. But that just tells you how much pressure I was dealing with.
I can only imagine.
And I had no time to build the right support structure.
Yeah.
Because immediately I became SRC president, then Fees Must Fall 2.0 started. I was in the thick of things. And when things slow down, there are these broken relations, and you know. So that's how hectic the situation was.
Yeah.
But maybe in conclusion is to say, when you, as I said, when you live for something far greater than you,
yes,
you ought to understand that there are sacrifices
that's true
to be made. And sometimes you don't have the full scope of the sacrifices that have to be made. And it's only when you are in the thick of things that you realize, okay, part of the sacrifice is my mental state, you know? Was it a worthy sacrifice? Yes, it was. I mean, I wouldn't trade that experience for anything. Because I believe whatever happened to me at that time did not happen to me. It happened for me. I was being prepared for far greater things.
Yeah.
And secondly is that if I was not given that privilege to lead, because it's really a privilege when people entrust you with their vote to say, we want this person to it's a privilege. I would not be the person that I am today. There are doors I have entered that I wouldn't have entered. There are people I've met that I wouldn't have met if it wasn't for that experience.
Yeah.
You know, so for me, it's like it was a necessary process in your growth as a leader.
It's part of the process.
It's part of the process. And I'm glad that I gave it my all, you know, because I got to fully experience it.
Yeah.
And I can tell you for now that there's no responsibility that I'm given at this point in time which would be impossible for me.
Absolutely.
You know, so for me, it was a very difficult period, but it was a worthy period. To be a part of. It was a really great experience. I mean, it's such a great privilege. I mean, Wits is like what, 100 and something.
Yeah.
I think 104, if not 3.
Part of the history.
Yeah. And you can imagine the time I was leading, there were 36,000 students plus. So we can simply say out of the at least, 3 million students that have been at Wits throughout its existence.
Yeah.
Only that 100 and something gets to be SRC president. You know, to have your name on that board, it's a huge privilege.
It's historical.
But it's also a huge sense of responsibility.
It comes with responsibility.
And that's why when you look at most SRC presidents that have led at Wits become leaders in society. You know, can go to David Masondo. Dr. David Masondo is now the Deputy Minister of Finance. Nombendulo Mkhachwa was in Parliament. Balihlope, Floyd Shibambo. You can count them. It's such a great privilege and a great sense of responsibility, but a very great training ground.
It is.
That prepares you for the future. So I'm very grateful that I went through that experience, albeit the challenges that I've encountered.
Coming back to that as well, as a political activist, right? You had your own experiences. And in the midst of that, there are blueprints, right, in the political space in a form of ideologies or doctrines, right? Where the main intention maybe was to fast track the mental emancipation of our people, right? How do we then now, where you are, through the experiences that you went through, because you were on the other side, you were able to see what is and what is not, right? How do you then continue with the agenda of those who were before you? I'm talking about examples with Steve Biko, with Thomas Sankara, and so on. How do you then, where you are, at times like this, continue with the agenda, to continue to propel the mental emancipation? Because everything starts in the mind. Yeah. And looking at the struggles that we are still experiencing at this point, it's been happening, but it's just times are changing, but the problems remain the same. How do you then continue to contribute to propel this agenda to ensure that there is total mental emancipation for our people?
Well, look, I mean, the question of mental emancipation, it's quite a complex one.
Yeah.
You know, and it's going to take a long time because the forces that benefit from status quo are heavily entrenched and they are also fighting back, you know. I'm from a tradition that says, and this is in the deployment policy of the ANC through the eye of the needle. One of my favorite paragraphs there, it says, there are no ready-made leaders. Leaders are born out of the struggle to transform society. So in essence, we find our part in society when we seek to transform society. And it's not all about the grand gestures that you do. It's how you live your life, you know. It's your inability to sit back when there is injustice, wherever it rears its ugly head. It's you being interested in the total well-being of society, you know. It's understanding what you mean when you say, for example, I say I love South Africa. What does that mean? It means I'm interested in truly realizing a united, non-racial, non-sexist, democratic, and prosperous South Africa. So whenever I see racism, I can't keep quiet. I have to step up to that. And that's why one of our fights with management was us calling out racism in our first day speech for first years. We called it out, and we called out some lady by name. And unfortunately, she was in that seating because her child was about to start. But we called it out, you know. It means when I see sexism, you know, I have to stand up and say that's incorrect. You know, and in terms of what I'm doing now, I think I'm playing that role. As I said, that I'm at the OR Tambo School of Leadership. Wherein we are concerned with building the capacity of leaders. Because the people we engage with, I mean, we engage with the National Caucus of the ANC. Those are your members of parliament. And in there, you have chairpersons of portfolio committees in parliament. You have ministers. We engage with provincial legislatures, members of the provincial legislature. You know, you engage with, leaders of the ANC, which make up the leadership of the country. You know, and you engage with them in trying to say, this is the right way of doing things. We need to get to do things in the right way. And this is not even just about the ANC, but it's about the country as a whole. The more and more we keep doing wrong things, the more and more the country goes down.
That's true.
And the more and more we eat away from the future generation. You know, I mean, you look at the challenges that we're having now, for example, the VAT issue that is contentious now, it's as a result of people who've been doing wrong things in the country, in government, right? That's why we're here. I mean, we've borrowed so much money such that the biggest expenditure item in our budget is debt service costs. We pay over 1 billion a day in interest, right? The current projection, it says our debt service cost is sitting at at least 420 billion. So it means if you divide that by 365, we are literally spending over 1 billion a day in paying interest on debt. That is the biggest expenditure item, which eats away from the essentials such as education, which eats away from essentials such as health, such as. And when you ask yourself, what has happened to this money that has been borrowed, right? Why was it not invested in productive sectors? Because if it was, essentially the benefit of whatever output that comes out of that productivity should be helping us to service that debt. No one can answer for that. And the most simplest thing you can think of as a Minister of Finance is, okay, well, let me raise VAT, right? It's a tough choice, but it's an easy way out because VAT, yes, will guarantee you that revenue, but it will make the cost of living of our people quite high, which is already high,
It's hard.
So it for me, it's being engaged in seeking to transform society, finding a niche in which you operate in that seeks to change society, because before you even get to emancipate people mentally, they must eat.
That's true.
They must wear. They must be sheltered. You need to ensure that the primary essentials of what keeps them alive are in check. Before you can even talk about these ideologies of black consciousness or people must eat, And maybe that is the difficulty of, governing is because ideology, rhetoric doesn't work. You have to make difficult decisions that says South Africans must eat, South Africans must wear, South Africans must live a healthy life, South Africans must have access to education. And therefore you have to take tough decisions. So the part I play for me is I exist within spaces that allow me to express the ideas that I think are correct in leading this country forward. And I get to communicate those ideas with people who are leading this country, And of course, on a personal level, as I said, I'm an activist at heart, get involved in a number of things. I'm an entrepreneur. That's part of it. We should get into entrepreneurship and we should see it as a form of activism, because if economists are saying to us over and over that entrepreneurship is one way of dealing with the unemployment issue, which forms part of the trident challenge of poverty, unemployment, and inequality. It means that when you take that difficult decision to be an entrepreneur, it's not just for you to get rich.
You're solving a problem.
You're solving a problem, And that's why I'm saying we should view entrepreneurship as a form of activism.
True.
And we should really tap into it, because you and I have to be in a position where we ask ourselves, or where we tell ourselves that it's not enough to be job seekers. We must be job creators, right? We must be able to respond to this challenge of unemployment. We must employ our peers. We must employ other people. So it is in all of those small acts where we get to transform society. We get to make society better. You see, one of the challenges that face South Africa is the inequality problem. Right? And we need to resolve that. What are we doing to resolve that? You and I, in our daily efforts, right? What are we doing? And one of the things I usually talk about, especially when it has to do with us young people, we don't realize that conspicuous spending and conspicuous consumption is aggressive. Like, we are so used to spending, we're so used to consuming.
We are consumers, actually.
We're huge consumers,
Yeah.
and we're not producers of these things that we consume. And by overly consuming, we are exacerbating the problem.
And we are becoming a dependent generation.
Yeah.
And coming back to what I asked you to say, it is very much important for a mind, like emancipation. And the reason why I'm saying that is because when you understand the fundamentals of the reality of our country to start with, to say, this is what we are dealing with. Even those who were before us, this is what they were fighting. You come with them, and when you understand that as an individual, you come with a view of, I understand, now I know how to act. But now, not many understand. Let's put it, not many understand. That's why they don't feel compelled to say, as an individual, leadership starts with me. And the
Sure.
difference that I need to make starts with me. It starts with me changing my mind to understand that I cannot only be a consumer, I need to be able to be a creator.
Yeah.
How do we then shape that mindset on an everyday basis? Because it goes back to changing, like helping people understand those ideologies we're speaking about, the reality, or this is what we are fighting for. And here you are as a political activist, taking over from what they did and modifying like those ideologies, because now we are living in different times. Modifying, things are changing. Now you have to apply different strategies to make sure that we provide solutions. We are a solution-orientated generation. So now for me, I believe that it starts there. Hence, I asked you that question because I know for sure that we are consumers. And like when we have that culture and that culture is perpetuating, what are we becoming? A dependent generation. We are unable to say, I can't be a consumer. That means something must come in for me to consume. But it's more like I'm a consumer now when all that is gone. Hey, government, what are you doing?
Yeah. Yeah.
You get what I'm saying?
But look, as I'm saying, it's the small act. I mean, what we're doing now, podcast, conversations with Madam President, contributes to changing that mindset. You know, when you look at the content that is being created on social media platforms, whether it's TikTok or, you know, technology is allowing young people to actually start, you know, being creative and expressing themselves in a creative way. Yeah. Whether it's you know, the selling of clothes on Instagram or content creation and all of that, you know. However, we need to do more. Yes. Yeah, we need to do more, right? And in doing more, I think part of it has to do with educating ourselves. Yes. It's very important. You know, we need to educate ourselves and be able to also be knowledge producers ourselves. But we also need to start saying that we are not going to overly rely on government to make things happen, right? Because, you know, sometimes when we often use these words interchangeably, state and government. Yeah. Sometimes when we say the state is failing, we don't realize that we are a part of the state. We are. We are a part of the state. So when you say the state is failing, you are essentially in part saying I'm also failing, right? And we also need to build active citizenry. You know, we need to make it fashionable to be an active citizen. Yeah. There's a lot of apathy among young people, especially when it comes to performing their civic duties, such as going to the polls, such as engaging their municipalities or participating in public representation. We need to change that mindset. And we need to say to ourselves, this is our country. You can imagine, I mean, with the scourge of gender-based violence and femicide, for example. Yeah. I already fear for my children. I don't have children yet, but you already fear that, is this the society that I want to raise my children in? Yeah. So therefore says, I have to start acting better myself as an individual, right? And cultivate particular values that will not allow me to be a perpetrator of such or be a sponsor of such behavior, right? Because I'll have a daughter one day and I don't want them to grow up in... So being active citizens, being concerned about the state of the country And, the problem is with us in the middle class in particular, because at least you can afford to move around, you can afford, and you feel as if, nah, I don't care.
I'm sorted.
But you don't realize that most of us are actually one salary away from jumping off from this comfortability we're into a difficulty.
True.
If you don't get paid next month,
then
chances are you are
can't
in
even
shit.
afford that. Yeah.
I'm sorry for my French, but you are in a very bad state. So we need to do that, but also organizing ourselves in small ways, organizing ourselves for, meaningful projects,
Yes.
whether it's mentoring projects, whether it's community-based projects, whether it's science and technology projects where we meet as coders and say, we just want to create tools that will help us deal with the social ills that we have. Just being able to organize ourselves accordingly, because that's one of the things that we have lost as South Africans. We are no longer as organized as we should be. In fact, we're more divided amongst ourselves. And it's very sad because the pie is getting smaller and smaller.
It does.
And if we're divided, it means that the conflicts that we have amongst ourselves are going to be heightened because you have more and more people scrambling for resources that are diminishing. It becomes a survival of the fittest type of, perspective or mentality. Whereas we should realize that actually this is a point where we should come together and say, how do we resolve these challenges? For example, I have a friend who was speaking about the VAT issue. So I'm against VAT, and I say it's a regret. He says, no, I hear you. But if not VAT, then what? Because we need revenue. Right? We need to spend. There are constitutional obligations that we must meet. So it's not enough for you to say you don't want VAT. You need to propose where should that shortfall come from? Understand? So we need to be able to get involved in that sense, that it's not enough to be pessimists and to be people who are on the sidelines, are complaining about stuff. In every little thing that you're worried about, what are you doing or what are you proposing different to respond to the situation?
No, that's perfect. And I would like to say this here live on Conversations with Madam President. I mean, we are problem solvers. So here we are, Conversations with Madam President in partnership with TransLife 360, which is our foundation. And we'd like to bring Makhandeni events on board to say, let's see how we can, explore solutions to assist, especially those who are coming after us. I mean, we have high schools that needs that kind of enlightenment in a sense of helping them with their resources for them to be able to make their learning comfortable. You can be able to do that. So I'm saying let's commit that this year we are going to, even if it's 2 schools or 3 schools, we are going to make a difference. We are not only talking, but let's be solutions. I mean, like solution providers to say, yes, we are talking about solutions, but are we doing them? Because there's a difference between talking and doing. So I'm extending the invitation to say, let us do project this year to go back, especially places like disadvantaged rural areas where there's no information available. So we are the ones who are going there to provide the insights and information for them, to assist them, to do better in their studies, because it's very much important that they succeed. Because if they fail there, that means our problems are getting many, and they are depending on us from the exposure that we got, be it in every spaces that we've been in, for us to be able to take back that knowledge to say, this is what you can do. We've made mistakes, we've did this, so we can be able to advise them better. So I'm extending invitation to say...
Accepted.
Thank you very much.
Very accepted. That is my life. That is what I do on a daily basis.
So we have committed to the South Africans.
Yeah, no. And we'll be happy to come back and give them a report.
I would appreciate that.
We're very happy to jump on board.
No, I would appreciate that. Yeah. So going back to that, what can you Please tell us more about Makhandeni events. What do you do? I mean, you are a movement. You are a movement pushing a certain agenda to see the changes happening. What are you all about as Makhandeni events? What are you all about? What do you aim to achieve? And all those things, so that we know what you're all about.
So you're quite correct. We started off as Makhandeni events when we registered the company in 2018. So when I started this company, I didn't want to lose the activism part of me.
Yeah.
Because I feel that is the essence of me. If I lose that, then I'll be lost in terms of who I am.
Yeah.
Going back to what we were saying earlier on about the importance of knowing who you are. So from onset, I decided I want this company to participate in corporate social responsibility in particular, because oftentimes what you see in terms of companies, they just, as a result of the Company Act and the relevant legislatures that they have to abide by, and in some cases, tax evasion and, getting rebates and all of that, they just throw money at the problem, without necessarily monitoring whether or not those projects are that they're spending huge sums of money on are actually meaningful and sustainable. So we wanted to fill in that gap, to say we want to make these whatever that we get involved in sustainable and be able to track it. So as a result, it means that what we do is project management. So we manage all the projects that we're involved in, whether fully or partially, but we get involved in the management of those projects. We do research on those particular projects, whether this is a relevant project, how can we enhance it, but we also do the marketing part of it, So all in all, that is our consulting offering to our clients. Yeah, and most recently we started working with government. We're involved in one project that has to do with digital migration. I'm not sure if you are aware that there is a move to actually move away from analog TV to digital television. So we're involved in that. In fact, we're still involved in that. But I can't share more details on that. But that's what we do. We are more interested in projects that have real benefit for society, And of course, any business that you run, profit is important. But we always say that we don't want to measure our profit based on numbers alone. There must be an impact factor in what we do. There must be an impact factor to say, what is the impact of what we're doing? And that's important, because if we don't do that, it's easy to fall into the tenderpreneur mentality.
That's true.
Right? It's very easy. It's very easy, to forget the core of who you are in business. It's a dog-eat-dog world in business. So if you lose sight of the core principles and values that make you who you are, it's very easy for you to also be part of the problem. To become an entrepreneur who's just chasing money, who's willing to do anything just to get money. And when you get that money, you still perpetuate this conspicuous spending and, So that's what we do. That's what we are all about. For example, what you spoke about, going to schools. The offering we can come up with there is, say, we can approach certain relevant institutions to come with us. We can say when we want to go to schools, we want to go and find out what is the issue there. You find that sometimes there's an issue that has to do with the kids going to school do not have food, and they rely on, the free meals that they get from school as a result of government intervention. At one school like that, what we did, we established a food garden and said, this food garden will feed those students, beyond what they are getting in the feeding scheme, whether it's uniforms, whether it's sanitary pads, whether it's shoes. I'm also involved with the institution called Moving Spirits. I'm part of their board member, which seeks to improve literacy amongst young people.
Yeah.
And they also work with schools. In fact, today, as I'm speaking to you, we're having a readathon in one of the schools in Soweto, where we are having some sort of a competition on reading, So those are people we can bring on board and say, we want to go to a rural school, and part of what we want to do is to improve literacy amongst the learners.
Yeah.
Which also involves donating books, spending time with the kids, sharing information. So those are the things that we were involved in. And we find a creative way of monetizing some of those services so that whoever who's involved with us also can be able to put food on the table with whatever little that we're able to give to them.
No, we already started.
Yeah.
We already started. The partnership has been formed. Time is no longer on our side.
Okay.
But briefly, and before you say your last message to your viewers, what grounds you?
God. Yeah, God. One word is God. Without God, I don't know where would I be. For me, it's God. It's knowing what God wants for my life and accepting it for what it is. Sometimes it's not easy to accept what God wants.
It's never
for
easy.
You. It's never easy, right?
You must never lie.
Sometimes what God wants for you is inimical to your heart desires.
Say
But
that again.
You need to be able to spend time with Him, so much so that you are accepting of His will, and you're truly obedient to what is required for you to be able to perform this will. I mean, I'm a Christian.
Yeah.
You can only imagine how difficult it was, and the Bible records this, for Jesus to accept that He had to be crucified. He Himself says, if possible, can this ordeal be removed?
Yeah.
Right? But only if it's your will. Right? For as long as it's your will, I will be able to succumb to it. And that's why I said earlier on, when you give yourself to a cause, when you find a particular purpose that defines who you are, you surrender yourself to the sacrifices that come with it.
Yeah.
Right? So for me, it's God. Everything that I do, almost everything that I do, I always ask myself, is God happy with what I'm doing?
Yeah.
And trust me, there's a lot of things I do that He's not happy about. I'm human.
Yeah.
But when it comes to the fundamentals, I always go back and say, I hope that I am, working in your will. And maybe to emphasize that, I often say that in the kingdom of God, there are beneficiaries, there are, people who are just part of the kingdom, and they are ministers of the kingdom. And that's a huge task.
Yeah.
Because whatever you do, you no longer do it for yourself. You do it for the kingdom itself.
Yeah.
Whatever that you do, it's no longer about you and what you want.
The self is completely dead.
It's completely dead, and it takes a lot to get there. But it's such a rewarding thing to get there because, before I got here, man, there were a lot of things that, I look back that used to excite me that don't. Like, branded clothing, designer clothing, cars, and used to excite me.
Yeah.
But now I'm like, nah, there's something bigger to live for. So what grounds me is these 3 letters. God.
Thank you so much for being with us.
Yeah.
For sharing this information. And we are partners now.
Sure.
We've got to do the work now.
Sure. We'll shake on it.
Thank you very much for gracing us with your time, with your presence, and sharing your knowledge and your experience. It really will assist other people out there. And to my viewers out there, we just want to say thank you very much. Until next time, goodbye.